Kia ora, Lara here, Scrappykea. I'm going to share with you a layout I have created using the Confessions of a Paper Addict Mason Jars cut file. Now, this video is a bit longer than the videos I've done recently because I'm going to get messy with quite a bit of paints and texture pastes and all these different things. So I'm just spreading out my sort of mat here. This is a great mat for protecting work surfaces unless you get really messy. Some of my splatters did make it beyond the desk. So I'm using the Mason Jars cut file by Confessions of a Paper Addict, and they come in the 3, and what I've done is I've shrunk them down and then I've joined them up in my Cricut design space and then cut them as sort of a background cut file. Now I really actually have no idea how this layout's going to turn out, but I'm just going to go with it, and I'm doing this voice recording after the fact, and I absolutely love what developed from this page. So I've used some sprays that I mixed with some ink refills to start with, a yellow one and a nectarine, I think it was lemon. And then I have pulled in some gloss sprays. So I've used tangerine, I've used cheddar, and I've used gilt. And I've also brought in some of the shimmer brushes that Close to My Heart has, and I've chosen sort of the oranges and the yellows for that. So now I'm going to grab some texture paste. Now I had to open the second jar of texture paste because one of them I thought might have been a bit dry, which is why I grabbed 2, and I'm just choosing some. I've grabbed some of that out. And I toy with the idea of doing it just white, but I end up using some of the mustard seed distress oxide, and I mix that up with the texture paste, and I also bring in some of the and it's a Stickles glitter gel, and it's the nebula one that I mix in as well, so it sort of gives some nice wee stars and sparkly bits in there, just a bit of shine. And I'm also using some abandoned coral distress oxide in here, and I just really like the colour that it comes out with. It ties in beautifully with the apricots. It's one of those happy little wasn't an accident, but a happy combination or creation in here. So I'm using a couple of different I'm going to use a couple of different stencils. That 2 of them I've made myself on the Cricut, just cutting them out from stencil paper, and one of them is one that I purchased somewhere. I think it might have been a Vicky Boutine one with some scripty fonts. So this plus one was just a series of plus signs that I cut out from some stencil paper. I've used this a few times and really love what happens with it. So some of the colours are slightly different with the texture paste, but that's okay. So now I'm getting any last little bit I can, and here's sort of that scripty font. Now this one's got a few words on it like adventure, great day, that kind of sort of positive moments type thing. So I'm just using some of the white texture paste that's there and just using what's left over just because I can, and because it's right there on the mat ready to use. So this is going to take a little bit of drying once it's fully done, but just before I get to the drying, this is where I'm going to bring in some of those shimmer brushes. So I'm just making sure they've got enough ink coming through, and then just splattering these onto the pages. I really like both the nebula and the shimmer brushes, just add a little bit of a sparkle, which you probably can't see on the video, but looking up close at this layout when it's finished, it's just beautiful colouring. So happy with that, and now it's time to get out the heat gun just to dry it off a bit before I can carry on. So now here's the mason jar cut file. I'm going to use some liquid glass to stick it down. Because I've got sort of the mixed media background, I'm going to need to make sure that it is well adhered to the page. These lines are really thin, so foam tape wasn't really an option. So now I'm pulling out the Close to My Heart watercolour palettes, and I'm going to colour in each of these little jars just with that apricot-y colour, and you'll see when I bring the photos in how that all works. So I've just chosen 2 of the colours, well, one I'm doing here, so I'm going to do all of the jars using the same orangey colour all the way around, and I'm just basically filling in. It's not a precise science. There will be some on the sides of the jars. That's absolutely okay. It's mixed media, and it's about messing it all up a little bit. So I have been playing with my watercolours a little bit lately on other projects, but I haven't actually used them on a scrapbook page for a long time, and I really enjoyed using the cut files in this way and using the watercolours to fill them in. I'm not sure which actually takes longer, if you back the cut files or painting in them. But it was a lot of fun anyway, creating the dimension that I'm going to do shortly with using the next orange over. So it's a bit darker, and I'm just going around the left edge of each of them and spreading it in a little bit just to give it that roundness to add to a bit of a round shape on each of those jars. Now, the photos that I'm going to be adding to this are some apricots that my husband and I went down. It was his cousin and his wife's place, sort of about 40 minutes drive from home, and she put a post on Facebook saying, come and take my apricots, come and pick them, because she's just basically got a lawn that gets carpeted with apricots because they can't use them all. So the property that they're on used to be an orchard. And so we really enjoyed heading down and picking all of those apricots, and then when we got home it was a matter of getting different preserving jars and things like that ready to put the apricots in so that we can use them through winter. It was a gorgeous sunny day while we were down there, and made jam. We've got some preserved apricots, and later on I even made some chutneys, which reminds me I need to go back and make a few more. We ran out of vinegar for that. So the picking process, my husband was up a ladder. He had a fruit picker's basket, which was kind of a cool contraption because he was able to put the apricots that he picked in there, and then he'd pass the container down to me, and I was able just to loop it off, and they'd come out the bottom, and then you'd tie the base back up again and send it back up the ladder. So it was a warm but lovely afternoon, and nice to catch up with the people whose house we're at as well. So for the tops of each of the jars, I've just chosen a fairly neutral colour, so I've just used that brownie colour from up on the top, and I'm going to do similar with the tops of the jars that I did with the insides, where I'm going to go back through and use a slightly darker colour just to add a little bit more texture and dimension to each of those wee jars. Now you'll see that the texture and the other bits and pieces that I'd already added to the background come through. Again, I actually really like how this looks, and it looks really cool, so don't be afraid to use cut files over top of all the textures and the different dimension that you might find in there. So just finishing off the tops of these jars with that slightly darker colour. Again, it's not a precise science, and really like how they look. So now I am going to back my photographs. Now I start off with 4 photos here, so I'm just going to put them onto some sort of a scrap piece of white daisy cardstock to give each of the photo a bit of separation from the background. And so you can see the 4 here, and I end up taking one of these out because I think when I tried to place them, it was the odd numbers seemed to look better in a design thing, and with all 4 of them it kind of filled up a whole border, and you couldn't see some of their gorgeous jars and the texture and the background and stuff in that. So I did take out the picture that I'm just trimming now of just the apricots up in the tree. It wasn't necessary for the story. It was lovely looking up at them while I watched my husband pick the apricots before he needed me to empty the container, but they weren't needed. So anyway, so I play around with that, play around with the photos, thinking it through, and I've grabbed out some of the Sweet as Honey patterned papers from close to my heart, and I'm just playing around with which ones I'm going to back the back the photographs with. And I end up going for this gorgeous sort of yellow with an old-fashioned kind of wallpaper design. It's probably got a better name than what I've given it, but that's okay. So I am sticking these down, and then I'm going to just trim around them with scissors, similar to what I did with the white daisy cardstock. So I'm not making these as neat as I tried to get the White Daisy cardstock, because I'm going to sort of wrinkle up the paper edges as I go. Now, I quite liked the separation that this sort of texty font or this sort of newspapery kind of paper gave. And when we were preserving the apricots, it was kind of something, it reminded me of times gone by, I guess. We often just go to the supermarket and buy things in a can, but it was quite nice doing them ourselves, knowing exactly what was put into the jars and the ingredients and things like that. So the newspaper kind of had that old feel to it and added to the atmosphere. Now, I play around with that black paper, but I decide I don't want it. I think it's too detracting from both the photos and from the gorgeous cut file that I've got there in the background. So I start sort of playing around with arrangements of some of these photos, and I don't mind that, but I do end up wanting to go for more of a horizontal layout for the photographs. And so I'm sort of happy with how they are there. So I'm going to use foam tape to attach these on, and I'm going to use I'm going to stick down the center one first and then put the other two, build the other two around it. So I'm just using some 3D foam tape and 3 different strips of it to attach these on. Just wanted them to be able to sit nicely on the cut file in the textured background, so it was important to use the foam tape because that'll help even out the levels of the photographs. So now that I've got those down, I'm just going to wrinkle up the edges of each of the photo mats that I've sort of created. It's messy when you've got mixed media in the background, so by lifting up the photos and adding to that too, it's just adding to that that sort of distressed kind of messy look. Now, when you go to preserve apricots, you're using sticky stuff, so it was messy just like my background. So now I'm going to add these wooden letters here. I just wanted to keep with the natural tones and the natural colours, and I did wonder about inking these up with the abandoned coral or mustard seed, but decided that having just the wood in there was quite nice, and it added a little bit of a different colour, but it was still in keeping with the different tones. So I'm using the Tombow Glue here with these. I've just found with the wooden letters this is a really good adhesive to use, and especially with, again, that different textures in the background worked really well there. So just putting a little bit of glue, pressing down each, and then I'm going to put a bit more pressure on that while I put the lid on, and they stuck down beautifully. So there we go. So now I'm going to just add my journaling down the bottom right, and now I'm going to add some of these glitter gems just at different points around, just as another little point of interest, and bringing out some of that glittery background that I've got with both the shimmer brushes and the glitter gel, as well as the gilt spray. Hey, thank you for watching, and subscribe if you enjoyed this.